Welcome to the Ambient iPad. In this video, I'm going to once again use the Roland RE-202 Space Echo to do some long delay sound-on-sound looping. The signal chain is a Roland Aerophone AE-20 wind synth. Its output goes directly into the Space Echo. The output from the Space Echo goes into a Boss Wazacraft Dimension C pedal, which I'm using just to deepen and widen the stereo field. The output from that pedal goes into a Universal Audio Volt 276 interface, and I'm using the iPad Pro just to record this external audio, and I'm doing that in GarageBand. Really no effects at all. So I've done this setup before with the bass, with the Mellotron, so I want to do it with the wind synth now. I've described in all those videos how to get into long delay mode, and there's an explanation down in the description how to do that. It's also in the manual. But essentially this box comes standard with about a second of delay. You can change that, so that is 2 seconds. You can only get to that 2 seconds though once you make that change through the tap. So the easiest way to get a longer delay than that is do the 2-second tap on head 1. Once that's going, if you switch to head 2, you now have 4 seconds of delay. And if you switch to just head 3, then that's how you get the 6 seconds of delay. But it's a Space Echo. The sound degrades fairly quickly. It's not like some other tape delays where a lot of wow and flutter gets introduced. Unless you introduce that yourself, it's fairly minimal. Instead, it kind of squeezes the frequency range. That's the best way I can describe it. The highs and the lows start to fall off, and it becomes really a woody, mid-rangey sound, and the volume really starts to drop. But there's really some interesting ways that I've noticed that the sound changes using the wind synth versus the bass and versus the Mellotron. But first, even if you don't want to do sound-on-sound looping, this is an amazing pedal. I've just got some random setup here in manual mode, and this is what it sounds like. So you hear those kind of classic Space Echo echoes. I already have the 6-second delay set up, and I'll switch to that. I've got that because you can have 4 patches on here, 4 memory slots that you can save. There's access to a lot more if you're using MIDI, and there's also that manual setting that we were on. So once now I have it set up here, I do need to adjust the knobs just slightly because I had them in a random setting for the manual. And I think the best way to do this is because I've, done a ton of wind synth videos. I don't need to go through that. I've done a ton of these videos. What I want to do is let me just get a quick sample loop going with one sound. And I'm going to do that because I want to demonstrate what the Dimension C is doing. So here's a little loop. Now let me add in another sound. So you can hear we're already getting that frequency response, smearing of the notes. Now that the loop's going, let me turn the Dimension C off. So you can hear it kind of collapses a little more mono. Back on. Very subtle because I have it on the lowest setting. Oh, and I also have it on the SDD 320 setting, which was the rack mount Dimension C. So let me go to the highest setting here, which is button 4. So you can hear it's a little more dramatic. Little modulation, not going to really get into a lot of the capabilities of this pedal. That's a separate video that I'll get to. But let's go back to the lowest setting. So now it's off, back on, just very subtle. Now you can hear, so we've got the volume that's gone down. It's really getting fairly mid-rangey. But the interesting thing versus the mellotron and the bass, although these do this to a certain extent, is, and you'll hear this when I do the jam and I do a lot more notes, it just starts smearing and melding together and almost making a new synthesized sound. I'm controlling the feedback through the intensity knob, and I've got it typically set at 1/130. That'll keep it as steady as it'll go from a volume perspective, but it'll keep degrading. If I start going past 130, even up to 2 o'clock, it will get into self-oscillation and distortion, which works as well. All right, and then also because that's off, you can, do some soloing over it. But that's essentially the setup. It's pretty straightforward. In essence, I'll link to one of the previous videos I did because I'm just really replacing the wind synth with either the bass or the mellotron, and I do go a little more in depth into stuff, but it's a pretty straightforward way of doing sound on sound looping. I turned the intensity down to about 11 so you could hear that going. Let me just turn that down all the way just to get the existing loop out of there. Okay, so it's off. So now what I can do is I'll put that back to about 130. Everything else is set the way I want it. So let's just go in here and do this. Turn that down a little so it'll fade out. But right here, you can hear what I was talking about in the beginning before the jam, where the notes start to pile up. He's really creating a new sound. So with synthesized sounds and the wind synth, I like that. It's a lot of fun. I mean, given the choice, I prefer a pristine delay so that I'm not losing that and I have a lot of control over the decay time and the frequency and the repeats. And usually I shy away from the things that manipulate that too much, like, for example, in El Capistan from Strymon. I just think the repeats, it just degrades too quickly. You can't turn off the wow and flutter. And to be honest, you're hearing a little wow and flutter here. It's not as much the unit itself as the Waza, the Dimension C pedal, which is introducing a little modulation but very little movement, not, very different from a traditional chorus. But it just has this unique sound on those repeats. Of course, the fact that, the original Space Echo, you weren't doing any sound on sound looping. And even Roland's previous iterations of this didn't really allow those extended delay times as easily. So it's very interesting to use any kind of delay for sound on sound looping that's not really meant for that, because you really just don't know what's going to happen. There's certainly a large element of hazard and chance in any jam, any improv, and that bit I like a lot. I like just kind of, you jump off the cliff and you just see where you're going to go. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, and good luck with your own music.